The gym manager leaned back in his chair, smirked at me, and delivered the line he'd clearly delivered 100 times. Yeah, no, you can't cancel. You're in an 18-month contract. You've got another year to run. Should have read the small print, really, and he did a little shrug. The shrug of a man who enjoys this part. I'd tried to cancel for a simple reason. I'd changed jobs, moved across the city, and physically could not get to this gym anymore. I'd explained all that, politely. And the answer was the smirk and the shrug, and should have read the small print. He thought he had me. He thought the contract was a wall. I'd been paying nearly £50 a month for a gym I could no longer reach, and this man was telling me I'd be paying it for another 12 and finding it funny. I didn't argue with him. There's no point arguing with a man who's holding what he thinks is a winning hand at his own desk. I just said, okay, thanks for your time, and I left. And he probably thought that was that. Another member who'd huffed and given up. But I went home and I looked up the actual rules on gym contracts and unfair terms. And what I found meant that the smirk and the shrug and that you're locked in for a year were all built on something that wasn't nearly as solid as he thought. Here's what that smirking manager was betting I'd never check. A contract term isn't automatically enforceable just because it's written down and you signed it. If a term is unfair, if it creates a big imbalance against the consumer, it can be unenforceable. And long lock-in periods with no reasonable way out, especially when your circumstances genuinely change, are exactly the kind of thing that gets looked at as potentially unfair. There's specific guidance on gym contracts precisely because gyms are notorious for this. Punishingly long minimum terms, no fair exit, front desk staff trained to smirk and say small print until you give up. It's a business model built on people not knowing that you signed it and it's enforceable are two different things. So I stopped talking to the smirking man at the desk entirely. He wasn't the decision maker, he was the wall they put in front of the decision maker. I went over his head in writing. I wrote to the gym's head office and customer relations. Calm, specific, and quietly armed. I set out my situation. The job change, the move, my genuine inability to use the gym. Then I explained that I considered the lock-in term, applied in these circumstances with no fair means of exit, to be an unfair contract term, and I referenced the consumer rules and the guidance on gym memberships directly. And I finished with the line that matters. I said that if this couldn't be resolved fairly, I would be reporting the contract terms to the relevant consumer body. Because unfair terms aren't just my problem, they're everyone's who signs the same contract. That last part is the bit the smirk never accounts for. The reply did not come from the man at the desk. Of course it didn't. It came from someone at head office whose job is to make problems go away before they become expensive, and who understood immediately that I wasn't a member to be shrugged at. I was a member quoting the actual rules and threatening to report them. And the tone was a different universe from the smirk. Thank you for getting in touch. Having reviewed your circumstances, we're happy to cancel your membership with no further charge. Not just cancelled, they also refunded the payments they'd taken since I'd first tried to cancel. Because they knew, and I knew, that continuing to charge me while I disputed an unfair term was not a good look for anyone. And there was an apology, an actual written apology for the inconvenience and the way it had been handled at the branch. The smirk, notably, did not make it into the letter. Here's what I love about how this ended. The manager at that desk genuinely believed the contract was a wall, because for most people, it is. Most people hear, you're locked in, should have read the small print, feel stupid, and keep paying for a gym they can't use. The smirk works because it usually works. It stops working the moment someone goes over the desk, in writing, to people who know that an unfair term is worth nothing no matter how confidently it's defended. I never went back to that gym, obviously. I joined one near my new job, and I reported the contract terms anyway, like I said I would, because the next person who gets the smirk deserves for someone to have already made a fuss. Here's the lesson. You signed it is not the same as it's enforceable. Unfair terms can be challenged. The confident no at the desk is often just a script. And going over someone's head in writing beats arguing with them to their face every single time. Has a company ever smirked at you and told you that you had no options? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more complete stories with no part twos that never come, follow the page. New story every day.